And thank goodness I come from Harvard Medical School, or what I'm going to tell you tonight you would find extremely difficult to believe is true.
So then the question is, can you accelerate cell repair?
So how do we reverse our biological age clock? What do we have to do?
And I realized that all of my sickest patients had one thing in common.
If you're interested in living a longer and healthier life, then listen to these four experts tell us what we can do now, what's new, and what the future holds for us when it comes to longevity and our health.
First of all, we know that DNA is sort of like a shoelace. It has plastic tips at the end. Every time a cell reproduces, the tips get shorter and shorter and shorter until finally they fray. And you know that your shoelace without the plastic tips will simply fall apart. That's what happens inside a cell. A cell, for example, your skin cell, will divide about 60 times. That's called the Hayflick limit. Then the cell goes into senescence and eventually dies. So in some sense, every cell has a biological clock. It is doomed to die after about 60 reproductions. However, telomerase can eliminate some of the contraction of the chromosomes, and the chromosomes can maintain their length. So at first you may say, aha, we can now defeat the biological clock, but not so fast. First of all, cancer cells also use telomerase. Cancer cells are immortal. Cancer cells are immortal, and that's precisely why they kill you. Why are cancer cells so dangerous? Because they are immortal. They grow and they grow and they grow until they take over huge chunks of your body, meaning that your bodily functions cannot be performed and you die. So we have to make sure that when you hit ordinary cells with telomerase, that you don't also trigger cancer in the process. Now, also you have to realize that genes are also very essential for the aging process. It turns out that we know what aging is. Aging is the buildup of error. That's all aging is. The buildup of genetic and cellular error. As cells begin to age, they begin to get sluggish because genetic mistakes start to build up. Now, cells, however, have a repair mechanism. They can repair damage to their cells. Otherwise, we would all basically rot very soon after birth. However, even the repair mechanisms eventually get gummed up, and then the cell really starts to get old as a consequence. So then the question is, can you accelerate cell repair? That is another branch of gerontology which is being looked at, using genes and using chemicals to accelerate the repair mechanisms. For example, if I take any organism on the planet Earth, from yeast cells to spiders, insects, rabbits, dogs, and even monkeys now, and I reduce their caloric intake by 30%, they live 30% longer. In fact, the only organism which has not yet been deliberately tested by scientists are Homo sapiens. All the other species obey this basic rule. You starve them to death, they live longer. This is independent of telomerase. This is a function of the wear and tear that we have on the cells. And this is the only known way of actually deliberately extending the lifespan of any organisms almost at will. Now, what we want is a genetic way of mimicking this mechanism without having to starve yourself. Because how many people do you know would be willing to starve themselves in order to live 30% longer? Not too many. So then the question is, are there genes that control this process? And the answer is apparently yes. There's something called the sirtuin genes, SIR2 being the most prominent of them. They in turn stimulate certain enzymes, among them resveratrol, which is found in red wine, for example. So this does not mean that drinking red wine or taking telomerase is the fountain of youth. I don't think that anyone has a fountain of youth yet. What I am saying is, we are now finding pieces of the fountain of youth, tantalizing clues that mean that perhaps in the coming decades, we might be able to actually unravel the aging process. We don't have it yet. Don't go out to the drugstore and stock up on these kinds of chemicals and enzymes thinking you're going to live forever. However, it is conceivable that in the coming decades, we'll come very close to finding it.
But what has happened in the last 25 years is nothing short of revolutionary. And thank goodness I come from Harvard Medical School, or what I'm going to tell you tonight, you would find extremely difficult to believe is true. I'm on record saying that the first person to live to 150 years has already been born, and I said that about 5 years ago, and in the last 5 years, something extraordinary has happened since, making me think that it's not just 150 years, all bets are off. This is what I want for everybody. We can all do this if we just know the facts and don't pay attention to 99% of what's out there on the internet, because it's all wrong. What we need to do is to tap into our body's natural defenses against aging. We have three main sets of defenses. One's called mTOR, responds to fasting. One called AMPK, responds to low energy and lack of sugar. You want to keep your blood sugar levels low as possible without fainting. And the group of genes that I work on are called the sirtuins, and they respond to all of the things that we do, the adversity, the exercise, the fasting. And this group of genes and these proteins that the genes make sense the environment, and when times are thought to be tough and could threaten us, they fight harder to keep our body safe, protected, and ultimately healthier and longer lived, even late in life. And what they're doing, these sirtuins, is controlling this structure here. They're doing a lot of things, I should say, but the main thing that I believe they're doing to make us live longer is controlling what we call the epigenome. But here's the analogy, that the DNA is the digital information on a compact disc. Those of us who are old enough know what that is. For the youngsters, this is what we used to store 20 songs on. It was great technology. That's your genome, the digital information. The epigenome is the reader, and it can read different songs depending on different parts of the body and different cell types. But what I believe is causing aging is the skipping of those songs, skipping of the reader. And what makes songs skip? Scratches. So aging is essentially scratches on a compact disc that makes the music skip. And eventually, cells, by reading the wrong genes, skipping the wrong genes, lose their ability to fight against disease. They lose their function. We get dementia, we get heart disease, we get cancer, we get frailty. That is aging. So with this new theory of what I call the information theory of aging, we can perhaps test this by testing if epigenetic changes cause aging. And if that's true, is it possible to reset these structures back to being young? Is there a backup copy of the epigenome? In other words, can you polish that CD and get back the original music of our youth? One of these mice has been on the sirtuin activating molecule called NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide. And hopefully you can guess which of these mice has been rejuvenated from an old state. These are really old mice. They're almost 2 years of age, and only one of them has been drinking NMN in the water. And if you pick the mouse on the right, you'd be wrong. It's the mouse on the left, obviously, and we have published in the journal Cell in 2018 that this is possible to rejuvenate the cardiovascular system of mice and make it younger through the sirtuins. And we know it's working through the sirtuins because if we delete those genes, you don't get this effect on these mice here. But that was just the beginning. That's 2018. We're now in a world where our technology makes this pale into by comparison. We now have the ability to reset the age of an entire animal, leading to one day being able to reset the entire age of our bodies. So you might say, well, this sounds great, but how long is this going to be before we have it? And my hope is that we're at a turning point in human history, as important as flight and Silicon Valley and energy and crypto. The 22nd century is going to be about biology and the ability to control your age and the rate of aging and slow down not just body aging and heart aging, but even brain aging with these tools and age reversal tools that are just coming along will radically change the arc of our lives in a way that we can barely even imagine. And when we can reset our age by a couple of years, which has now been published, that's been done by Greg Fahey and colleagues, if we do that every year, even just set your age back 1 year every year, what happens, right? Things then get really interesting. And that's the world that we have to stay alive to be able to witness. And if we all do the right things, we will witness that. Thank you very much.
I've seen people who were 40 who had a biological age of 70, and I've seen people who are 70 who have a biological age of 40. That's what's possible if we understand how to work with this. So how do we reverse our biological age clock? What do we have to do? Well, this is a patient I had at Cleveland Clinic. Her name was Janice. She had so many problems, right? She had heart disease, heart failure, angina, diabetes, on insulin. She had high blood pressure, her kidneys were failing, her liver was failing, she had fatty liver, and she was on a pile of medications. Her copay was $20,000 a year, and she had this whole list of problems, which is why I call myself a holistic doctor, because I take care of people with a whole list of problems. And Janice was on her way out. She was headed for a heart transplant and a kidney transplant. And we use this powerful new drug that has the power to transform and improve the expression of tens of thousands of genes, to optimize tens of thousands of protein networks, to balance and optimize your hormone regulation, to improve your brain chemistry, to optimize your microbiome. And it works faster, better, and cheaper than any drug on the planet. And it's available to almost anybody. Do you know what it is? What you put at the end of your fork is more important than anything you'll find in a prescription bottle. Within 3 days of changing your diet, we did it at the Cleveland Clinic on our Function for Life program, and it's based on a anti-inflammatory, detoxifying, microbiome-supporting diet, which I basically use at my patients part of functional medicine. I call it the 10-day detox diet, but essentially it's basically whole foods, anti-inflammatory, lots of good fats, low glycemic, a lot of phytonutrients. Within 3 days, she was off insulin. Within 3 months, using food as medicine, we were able to transform all her diseases. And food is like code. You can rewrite your biological software by what you're eating. If you understood that with every bite of food you take, you're literally transforming everything in your body in real time, you would think twice about what you're eating. Nobody mentioned in particular here, but and this is what happened to Janice after a year. In 3 months, she reversed her heart failure, her diabetes, her kidneys normalized, her fatty liver normalized, her blood pressure normalized. She got off all her medication. Her copay, like I said, was $20,000. She saved huge amounts of money, and she got her life back, and she lost 116 pounds. But like I said, within 3 days, she was off her insulin. In 3 months, she was off everything, and then took a bit to get the weight off. Community. So let's kind of get into it. What is causing the dysfunctions that we see in the hallmarks? What are those things that we need to deal with and get rid of, and how do we address those? Well, a lot of it's driven by inflammation that leads to these problems, and it's basically our diet. For every 10% of your diet that's ultra-processed food, which is about 60% to 67% of our diet, your risk of death goes up by 14%. So you do the math. It's a lot. The number one killer in the world today is bad food and not enough good food. Kills 11 million people a year conservatively. I think it's a lot higher than that, more than smoking or anything else. It just dwarfs anything. Why did we see America, who's got the best healthcare system in the world, and is 4% of the population, have 16% of the COVID cases and deaths? Nobody's talking about that. It's the food. It's sugar. I hate to say it, I love sugar like anybody else, but we are not meant to eat 22 teaspoons a day, which is about the average for the average American. And I know I'm not having that much, so you must be having a little more. And we used to have 22 teaspoons a year as hunter-gatherers. Maybe we find a berry patch. And this leads to this phenomenon called diabesity, which is the spectrum of pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes. This phenomenon now affects 93.2% of Americans at some degree or another, depending on how you define it. And toxins are a huge factor, too. We're exposed to 80,000 new toxins since the Industrial Revolution. Huge problem. Our microbiome has been so destroyed. If you look at indigenous cultures, their microbiome is very different. I want to do fecal transplants and find indigenous cultures that Wade Davis was talking about and get poop pills for us all to take, because I think it would help us a lot. That's coming, promise. Mitochondria, I'm not kidding, by the way. Mitochondria is a huge topic, and a lot of the ways that the aging and longevity switches work and food works is through mitochondria. What do the mitochondria do? They take the food you eat and the oxygen you breathe, and they combust it like an engine in your mitochondria through a whole assembly line and produce energy. And the waste is carbon dioxide you breathe off and water you pee out, and there's some waste, free radicals, and our bodies manage that. We deal with oxidative stress, but if we don't deal with that right, our mitochondria degrade, they get old, they get pooped out, and we lose energy, and we age fast. And a lot of the disease of aging, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, a lot of these are mitochondrial problems. Also, our sedentary lifestyle. I love these conferences and sitting, but I went and played tennis for an hour, and I feel much better by not sitting on my butt all day. And we know that now the lack of exercise, which probably maybe 8% of Americans get enough exercise, is also contributing in a huge way. So how do we reimagine aging? How do we address the hallmarks of aging? How do we optimize the matrix? How do we get to where we want to go? So we talked about the hallmarks. Now, there's different ways to get into this, and a lot of science is talking about how do we fix these problems? How do we optimize these systems? And they're developing drugs, and they're developing drugs for senolytic cells, for zombie cells, and they're trying to develop drugs to work on these various pathways that we're going to talk about in a minute, like mTOR, and they're looking at how do we, affect telomeres by different compounds. And we may be using medication. I'm not against medication, but we have a lot of the tools already. And one of the things that we know is that calorie restriction is a powerful tool for extending life. It's the only thing that works in animal models over and over again to extend life by a third. So if you want to live to be, as a human, 120, that's the amount, right? If you're 80 is the average life expectancy, you extend it by a third, that's 120. So this is repeatable. Of course, nobody wants to be starving and eat a third less calories because you're going to be hangry all the time and not very much fun to be around. And what does calorie restriction do? It gives our bodies a chance to repair itself through this process called autophagy. Who's heard of autophagy? Oh, God, you guys are good. Okay. So autophagy is key to healthy aging, which is basically the idea that we have our own repair and recycling system. When we're starving and don't get enough food, we still need proteins. We still need to do stuff with our bodies. So what are we going to do? We're going to harvest old cells and parts, and we're going to break them down and digest them, and we're going to get the amino acids and all the pieces, and we're going to stick them back together to make new proteins and new parts so we can live. That's what autophagy is. It's basically self-cannibalism in the service of repair and regeneration. Now, calorie restriction does a lot of other things too. It reduces inflammation, it reduces oxidative stress, it helps improve your stem cell function, it increases DNA repair. It's like this whole cascade of things start to go into play when you do calorie restriction.
So I dove into the research and I realized that all of my sickest patients had one thing in common. They all had unhealthy muscle. Betsy was not over fat. She was under muscled. Now, what I love in life is the opportunity and the ability to help people fight for what's important to them. And I want to share with you what I'm fighting for. And what I'm fighting for is muscle-centric medicine. Muscle as the pinnacle to health. Now, whatever it is that you're fighting for, the more healthy muscle you have, the stronger your capacity, the greater your energy, the better your ability to fight, because muscle is the organ of longevity. Now, I'm going to give you 3 strategies for maintaining the health of your muscle. But before I do, I want to lay the foundation for you. 73% of adults are either overweight or obese. Our health is in shambles because of our obsessive focus on body fat. How are we still struggling? Why are there so many Betsy's? Because obesity at its core is a disease of the muscle. We don't have a battle of the belly. What we have is a battle of the bicep. Now, if you fail to understand this concept, you too will be struggling with those same 20 pounds for a lifetime. We need to change the paradigm of medicine and think about muscle as medicine. Muscle is so much more than looking good in a bikini, although that's a plus. It's so much more than athletic performance and movement. Muscle is your metabolic sink, and it is your body armor. Muscle is your site for energy metabolism. Muscle will give you and augment a robust immune system. Now, what happens from a lifetime of overeating and underexercising? That metabolic sink, that skeletal muscle that is responsible for carbohydrate metabolism, fat burning, that sink gets clogged up, and your muscle looks like a marbled steak rather than a fillet. Now, we have been fighting the wrong battle. For 50 years, we have been fighting obesity. And for 50 years, we've been getting worse. Today and together, we are going to fix that. The more healthy muscle mass you have, the research is clear, the greater your survivability against nearly every disease. That is very rare to be able to say in medicine. We also know that the primary ways to support muscle health are resistance exercise and dietary protein. 23% of adults are meeting their exercise requirements. 23%. We know that as individuals age, muscle mass, strength decline. Resistance exercise offers us the closest thing to the fountain of youth that we have. We know that resistance exercise and dietary protein act synergistically to protect muscle health. So, did you know that 40% of women over the age of 65 don't meet the daily requirements for protein? I recommend all my patients have 40 grams of high-quality protein at that first and last meal of the day. Anything below that amount does not protect muscle in the same way. Muscle is made from protein. And I recommend high-quality protein, which include lean meats, chicken, fish, eggs, and dairy. Now, you're probably hearing the narrative that we should cut back on our high-quality protein. The unintended consequences of this will be devastating. According to the USDA nutritional guidelines, we're getting 70% of our calories from processed foods, processed grains, and sugars. We don't need a diet that is lower in high-quality protein. What we need is a better diet that includes both plants and animals. Protein is not the problem, it is the solution. Now, this is a big fight. This is my fight, and this is your fight. This is our fight. And this is our fight for muscle, and that begins today. I'm going to share with you 3 strategies. But before I do, I want you to promise me something. I want you to promise to share it with the Betsy in your life. And then I want you to share it with 3 more people. Number 1, resistance exercise 3 days a week. 3 days a week till you want to quit, and then you're going to keep going. Number 2, increase your high-quality protein. Number 3, increase your protein threshold at that first and last meal of the day. Now, my vision for the future is that we become advocates for our own health, that we become physically and mentally strong, and that we take back control of the way we age, and we do it together. We don't all have to end up like Betsy, and it's never too late to be forever strong together.
Well, that was a lot of information, and I hope you found it useful. And if you did, please subscribe and share it with your friends. And once again, thanks for watching.